Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Maryland Online webinar. We are kind of without our moderator today. Unfortunately, Rob Coyle. I am not Rob Coyle. Rob Coyle is not able to make it today. So you're stuck with me, and hopefully I will not mess this up too much. Please keep yourselves muted. And as far as questions are concerned for today, if you would wait until the end, the presentation is going to go on for about 30 minutes, and there's plenty of time for questions. If you're afraid you're going to forget your question, go ahead and put it into chat, and we'll address it at the end of the presentation. I want to welcome our two esteemed presenters. Michele Knight is an instructional designer for the Department of E-Learning Innovation and Teaching Excellence, also known as ELITE at Montgomery College. Her primary role is to help faculty integrate technology into their teaching. Prior to working for Montgomery College, Michele was employed as a multimedia specialist for Chesapeake College. Sorry, I'm admitting people as I read this. Michele's professional interests include teaching with mobile technologies, techniques to build public speaking skills, and the effective integration of technology into instruction. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Information Systems and a Master of Arts degree in the Instructional Systems Design from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. Tom Cantu has been at Montgomery College since 2002. He has a master's degree in instructional systems development, also from UMBC. Since 1998, he has been an instructional designer in higher education, consulting with faculty on ways to integrate web technologies into their teaching and guiding professors in planning and building online and blended courses. These are also both graduates of the Maryland Online Leadership Institute program, and they both have worked with Maryland Online before. So I'm very happy to turn things over to Michele and Tom.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you could be here. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to type your institution and your role in chat. Thank you for doing so, those of you who have already done it. It gives a sense of who's in the room. So Michele and I plan to explain how we were able to prepare over 800 Montgomery College faculty for remote teaching between March and December of 2020, and how that training has become the new baseline preparation for all Montgomery College faculty, ensuring that our faculty are well prepared for the next disruption. So if you haven't already done so, please type your role and your institution in chat, and we will begin. Oops. There it is. So if you're not already familiar with it, Montgomery College is a two-year college in Montgomery County, Maryland. Montgomery County, it begins in the northwest quadrant of Washington, D.C. in Tacoma Park. That's our oldest campus, Tacoma Park, and it extends northwest along the 270 corridor through Maryland. We have 3 campuses serving about 20 to 25,000 students, credit students rather, and 20,000 or more non-credit students each year. We have about 1,500 faculty, and about half of those 1,500 faculty are full-time. So Michele and I work for the Office of E-Learning, Innovation, and Teaching Excellence, otherwise known as ELITE, at Montgomery College. We're both instructional designers. And traditionally, there were 2 instructional designers at each campus. One instructional designer devoted to distance learning and technology infusion, and a second instructional designer from the former CTL, or Center for Teaching and Learning, devoted strictly to classroom pedagogy. We were all eventually folded into one unit, E-Learning, Innovation, and Teaching Excellence, which is commonly called ELITE. You'll hear us use that name regularly as we go. So on to what really happened, emergency remote teaching. You all remember it. Friday, March 13th, when the college shifted into remote teaching and working, ELITE mobilized. We went into high gear, all 7 instructional designers, including IT and, well, everybody actually. But we started offering webinars on using Blackboard Collaborate in order to teach remotely, as well as every Blackboard workshop that we offer, because Blackboard was the vehicle that we use. IT eventually released Zoom, because previously Zoom was only allowed for meetings. It wasn't for instructional purposes, and IT eventually upgraded the license and opened it up. There's something called Online Teaching Part 1. Part 2 is where they learn how to teach an online course, but Part 1 is all about Blackboard and using Blackboard to create a supplemental course site. I opened up a new section of Online Teaching Part 1, and about 170 people registered. About 130 completed. But when they go through it, not only do they learn everything about Blackboard, or just about everything, but they create a site that has to meet certain criteria, and we review those sites and give feedback. So there's often this back and forth of the feedback loop, asking for revisions and having them complete it. 25 people in a semester is normal, and 25 people in a semester is a lot. 130 was extraordinary. Well, that was a sign of what was to happen in summer. So in the meantime, Michele was busy crafting the SRT training, or structured remote teaching training, which she's going to explain in just a few moments. But our manager, Dr. Michael Mills, and Shinta Hernandez, now Dr. Hernandez, they got together and assembled a cross-functional leadership team of deans, faculty, instructional designers, and to act as a steering committee for figuring out, how does Montgomery College best use the federal CARES Act money in order to prepare the college for what we decided would be a remote teaching approach, which is simply teaching class by webinar. So as that leadership, as Michele was busy crafting the SRT training, and we were busy getting faculty ready to finish out the spring semester, the leadership team acted as a steering committee and added certain elements, which Michele is going to touch on. But I can tell you point blank, we couldn't have done what we did without 28 faculty mentors from the various departments. That was absolutely invaluable. They also added the idea of discipline connections, learning from experienced faculty in their own discipline, as well as embedding supports in Blackboard. And most faculty already know the supports that students need, academic and student supports that are relevant to their course. But they might not have thought of making those supports really obvious and really prominent, and providing them as just-in-time supports in their Blackboard site. So that was a useful addition. So before I turn it over to Michele to talk about the development of the structured remote teaching training and the nuts and bolts, I want to just give you a high-level view of what we created. So you'll hear me again talk about SRT, and that stands for structured remote teaching. And it's differentiated from emergency remote teaching, which is what we did in the spring of 2020, to structured remote teaching being much more deliberate and planned. We didn't go all in with fully online courses because creating a fully online course requires a redesign, and there was no time for that. So we went all in with structured remote teaching. And here it is in a nutshell. So SRT in a nutshell, 3 core elements. The first is to teach remotely when the class is scheduled to meet, meaning teaching by Blackboard Collaborate or teaching by Zoom. And probably about 90% of our faculty use Zoom. Teaching remotely when the class is scheduled to meet meant that if we were able to return to campus, students were already on schedule. That was when we still didn't know that this was going to last for 2 years. So that's the first part, teach remotely when the class is scheduled to meet. The second, create a learning module for each week, chapter, or unit. And for many, this was a shift, because we're talking about creating one learning module that contains everything students need to get the work for that block of time done. Many faculty, when they're supplementing on-campus courses with Blackboard, will end up creating separate folders for everything. A separate folder for the PowerPoint, a a separate folder for quizzes, a separate folder for assignments. And those of you who teach online, you know that creates the weekly scavenger hunt effect, where students are bouncing all around the site, trying to piece everything together, and it's not a clean and coherent process. So we wanted everyone to put everything students needed for that week, chapter, or unit in one learning module. And the third part was to do so by while creating a strong teaching presence, because that's very different from just throwing links in Blackboard. So Michele's going to talk about how she got them to create welcome videos using Screencast-O-Matic or Zoom, as well as posting their Zoom recordings when they were comfortable doing so that students had a recording of the live class session. I'd like to talk to you briefly about voice orienters and transitions. So this is something that we talk about often when we guide faculty through online or any kind of courses. But voice orienters and transitions changes the way things are presented. So voice simply means to write as if you are teaching. Think about what you would say if you were in class and write something very similar. Because too many times faculty are taught to write in a dry academic tone, and that is deadly, deadly in an online course or anything resembling an online course. So if they write as if they're teaching, then the animation that they have when they teach in person comes through in their writing. Or if you prefer, think about talking to one or two of your favorite students in your office. And the same thing, the animation that you normally have comes through in your writing. An English professor once told me that what you think when you write comes through in your writing. And she's right. So it's vital to write as if you're teaching. The orienters piece simply takes what you would do so naturally in the classroom. Introduce everything. It's too easy for faculty to throw links into Blackboard and students have just a lonely link to a file, a link to a website, a link to a video, without instructions, without introduction, without objectives, nothing. It's just a link. You would never do that in class. So orienters simply means to introduce everything. Tell them what you want them to do and why before they click. And transitions are simply an extension of orienters. Think about all the things that you do so naturally in class as you smoothly move students from one activity to the next, and the next, and the next, and write very similar transitions in your Blackboard site to move students from one thing to the next, to the next, and the next. And when it all comes together, voice, orienters, and transitions, it feels like the instructor is sitting beside you, talking you through the course. Let me add one other element. So the idea is that every learning module contains everything students need to get the work done for that block of time. But instead of just a collection of links, open each module with a version of this page. The introduction is designed to motivate and prepare students for the work ahead. So, because think about it, when a student fires up the laptop at night and starts to get to work, hopefully, you, professor, are competing with Netflix and a beer. This isn't new, though. Professors have many ways of getting students engaged and drawing them into the material. All we're asking them to do is to take what they do so naturally in class and recreate it deliberately in their Blackboard site. It could be a few sentences. It doesn't have to be elaborate. The objectives indicate the performance you expect on the assessment. And students may not read it, but it does a tremendous job of clarifying the professor's thinking. And then finally, a list of the assignments of everything that is due for this block of time. And then everything that follows in the module is simply the material students need to get that work done. There's so much more to explain, but that's SRT in a nutshell. Teach remotely, by webinar, build a learning module for each week, chapter, or unit, and do it with a strong teaching presence. So with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Michele to talk to you about the details. And Michele, it's all yours.
All right.
Do you want to share your screen or Do you want me to?
Yeah, I can share my screen.
All right.
Let's see here. Should be.
There it is.
Good.
We can
All
see
right,
it.
Great. Cool. All right. So Montgomery College, we always had Blackboard courses that we delivered as individual course offerings. And faculty had the option to take these course offerings face-to-face or online. Well, a year before the pandemic started, I got the idea to offer these courses as a collection of courses, kind of like a learning pathway. And the Blackboard courses were offered along with a course in Screencast-O-Matic that, as you all know, is screen conferencing software, and YouTube captions. But again, these were individual offerings, and it was not a cohesive curriculum. It was more like offering a faculty a taste in the Blackboard skills that they would need to be able to offer a Blackboard course that was appropriate if they were looking to accompany that course for on-campus instruction. So basically, to complete the pathway, they built a simple supplement that showed them using the tools that they would use with their on-campus students. I was able to use the bones of that pathway that I developed about a year before the pandemic to help develop the SRT course. And I'm going to talk you through the process and the thinking that was involved. So after the pandemic happened, and as Tom said, it happened to all of us and it happened swiftly, we needed a way to quickly be able to train 700 faculty into an experience where they could be able to deliver that course, which they had to deliver a remote offering that meant the same number of hours as the on-campus course would meet. And so they needed a site that would be robust enough to accompany that sort of teaching style. Therefore, the course that they made, it would need to be a lot more robust. So from the design side, then that means that we would have to alter this course. It needed to be more structured. It needed to be enhanced from a pathway experience where people could take courses in any order that they wanted into a structured weekly course offering. So the result is a course that we created that was actually 7 weeks. There were 5 weeks of structured learning activities or weekly deliverables. And there were also 2 weeks of additional time that we added in there for them to be able to build their site and work with a mentor. And in the end, our MC faculty learned to present course materials that supported those synchronous activities with their students in a clean and organized fashion, the way that Tom described to you just earlier, but that also showcased their instructor presence. And so this morning, I'm going to take you through the steps in the course design that we took to achieve that result. So the first thing that I needed to do was develop a syllabus that had weekly activities to guide the learner and keep them on pace. So we provided them with courses, activities, supplemental readings, and handouts that all complemented a theme for the week. So on my screen, the theme is communicating with students using Blackboard. So week 2 dealt with the discussion tools. It dealt with Collaborate in Zoom. We had a handout for teaching and learning tips for developing and improving online discussions. And we had a handout for webinar tips for presenters or tips for conducting a successful webinar. Now, I want to stress to you, we did have some of these resources. Some of these resources we did not have. And I distinctly remember writing webinar tips for presenters at the 11th hour to fill a gap. That gap that was needed to get them with everything they needed to communicate with their students using Blackboard. So again, we have 5 weeks of content, 2 weeks for them to refine their Blackboard course, and partnering with a mentor, as Tom did a beautiful job describing, in order to review their course site and apply those suggested changes and feedback. So all of that time was built in the process. Now, in addition to the cohesive theme that we had of those weekly activities and the things that they were learning that was designed to elevate their Blackboard instruction to the next level, we also had the building activities. And to me, that's the most important part of the course. They had a range of building activities that let them make practical application of the concepts that they learned in the SRT course. And they were building their real site that real site that they will be using for remote instruction. So at the end of the course, if they did the build it the way that we asked them, they would have prepared 2 weeks of the structured remote experience for their students. And we were keeping them on task because nobody wants to be building a Blackboard course at the 11th hour. And it's not the best way to build it. So they wouldn't be in a mad rush to build the course over the weekend if they kept pace with the build it's. And those who did keep pace with the build it. Now, you guys know that there were always people who will put it off to the last minute, but the ones who did keep up with the build it's, they were able to seek help along the way from us. They were a lot less panicked, and they were able to get help from their faculty mentors as well. And most importantly, at the end of this entire process, they built a 2-week model that they could use for the rest of their course in their development. So hopefully, if they applied our lessons, it wouldn't take them long to build the course. So when we think about giving feedback to faculty as they develop their course sites, Tom and I have been at the college for a number of years. He's been there since 2002. I've been at the college since 2006, and we regularly reviewed faculty sites, and we had processes for giving them feedback, both when they made like course supplements or when they taught online. We gave them extensive feedback, but it became clear that the system that we had in place was labor intensive. So if we're training 800 faculty, that we're going to need to streamline this process of giving comments and feedback that we give the faculty. So in doing that, to be able to give faculty that consistent feedback in a way that saves time, I developed this idea of developing this rubric that covered each of the major points that we give faculty feedback on when we look at sites, and providing them along a continuum. Needs improvement. And so these would be the things that when we would meet with them in their offices or we would review their sites, these would be the things that they needed some polishing or what was adequate. So these would be the things that when we were looking at the site, this is a well-organized, clean site. Or the things that were exemplary. So when we looked at their sites, it would be the things where we just went, whoa, the site is awesome. And, you know, the students are going to get a lot out of it. How to then actually standardize that feedback and craft it so that the feedback was embedded in the rubric. And along with that, a self-rating element. And the self-rating element was in there because it was hoped that faculty would be looking at their site as they were doing the building activities and look, for example, well, I have a welcome statement, but it's not inside the first page of my learning module. How can I move that along to adequate? Oh, I need to move it inside of the learning module and make it the first page. And it was also hoped that by having a self-rating with this rubric, that it would start the conversations with their mentors. Remember, they have mentors. Start the conversations with the mentors about what needs to be done to polish the site and get it ready to use with their students. So this was probably one of the most intensive parts of developing the course. And we needed to do it because it simply would not be possible to manage that kind of feedback with 800 faculty. So to use an old cliche, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm fond of cliches, I collect them. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And somewhere in my discussions with Tom, and Tom gets full credit with this, I remember us bleary-eyed late one night, and he came up with the idea of pairing the rubric benchmarks with a real example that came from a faculty course. Some of these examples were adequate. Some of these examples were exemplary, and we left it up to the faculty, the level to which they wanted to develop their course. Obviously, like all people who teach others, we want everybody to do the exemplary example, but the choice is ultimately theirs to make. And the adequate examples were just fine. They were definitely an acceptable standard. So the result of all of this, the carefully structured weekly activities, the in-depth rubric where we have the multi-tiered feedback and the faculty examples, is that we standardized our training and feedback process so that we could train 700 faculty. And more important than the inputs or what it is that it took for all of us to develop the SRT is the output. What's the result? What is the result of the training? The output is that we trained a group of faculty without a lot of experience using Blackboard. These were not people who were familiar with technology. We taught them to teach using Blackboard and develop well-organized courses that showcase their instructor presence in all of the ways that Tom taught you. And we showed them how Blackboard could be used as a tool to teach effectively. So they learn how to structure these Blackboard courses and use a predictable layout. They learn to use the Montgomery College tools in a predictable fashion. And I can't stress to you how important that was for their students who were also being thrown in this new environment of remote learning. They needed that consistency among all their courses. And again, all of that standardization was built in the weekly activities, the course syllabus, the faculty exemplars. It was all there. And we also taught them to use Screencast-O-Matic so that they could create welcome videos for their students. And that helped faculty, the faculty who did take the time to learn Screencast-O-Matic, or even if they use Zoom to record an intro video, they had sites that were more engaging than the students who did not have the welcome videos. And then we taught them how to use captioning with their YouTube videos. And therefore, there were some who already created videos. So the end goal for that was that their videos were more accessible than what they had been creating before, because almost none of them were captioning them. But if they never created videos before, and I'd say a good 40% of them probably never created videos, by teaching them how to do the YouTube captions and editing them, we were building good habits in that faculty member. And then, as Tom said, faculty, they know what the on-campus resources are that the students need in their discipline. And the students know it too. They know where the writing center is. They know where the library is and all that. But we needed to build that embedded supports into the assignments that were online, because these students were going remote and they need to know what exists in the remote environment. How can I access the libraries, the writing centers, and so on in the remote environment? So an explicit part of this was to ask faculty to build in connection pieces to these campus resources embedded directly on the assignment or whatever they were using. And then there were discipline connections. The faculty in these disciplines put a lot of effort into actually putting together presentations, videos, and instructions for tools that they use. So for example, our math faculty, they use specific tools when they teach online. They put these videos up showing how they use these tools, how the students use these tools, and made that available for their people in the discipline. And then another important aspect of the course was providing opportunity to reflect on what they learned and what the impact of these tools would be on their teaching practice, and more importantly, on student success. So there were embedded reflections that were at the discipline level, and they were written by people in the discipline, because who better to write it than the people teaching it? And because reflection is such an important part of learning, I wanted faculty to reflect not only at this discipline level, but I wanted them to reflect at a personal level. So I had self-reflection questions that were already in that old learning pathway, but I modified them so that they really cut to the heart of what they were trying to do with SRT. And the reflection questions, basically, they were to be submitted to us along with the evaluation in that rubric piece that I showed you, along with what site that we were looking at and the week that we were looking at. And I feel like these reflections were a nice bookend to the learning experience, that intensive 7-week training process, because I firmly believe that, I know for myself, you haven't learned anything if you didn't reflect on it, what that experience has brought to you and how it's going to make you better. And we didn't look at these, we looked at them, but we didn't evaluate them. I want to stress, we didn't evaluate them. We just evaluated the sites, but it still was a good way for them to reflect on what they learned and the process and what we all went through over that summer. So to that end, I want to share with you a few faculty comments, because Tom and I can talk about this until we're blue in the face, but it doesn't mean anything unless we actually hear from some of the learners. So one learner said that they felt like they were better prepared and it was an enriching and great learning experience. A comment that I felt like was humorous that I loved was that they didn't want to take the SRT training in the summer. They wanted a break, but they felt like the training was helpful and that their courses will be easier and less stressful. Another comment from a faculty member was that they felt excited to put their course together in a new way. And they felt like at first they were panicked and now they were enthusiastic about meeting their students. And probably Tom's favorite comment, before the class was a pile of folders loaded in the course content. And there's no comparison of their course before and after, because now their course is more coherent and usable. So clearly they were paying attention to Tom's lessons about orienters and transitions. So these comments made me feel good about the course. They made me feel like we as Elite did a job well done for the faculty members. And in turn, the faculty members were able to do a job well done for their students that we represented from Montgomery College as a department, Elite. And in turn, Montgomery College faculty were able to represent for their students during a time of crisis, as Tom says. And I felt like it was a job well done. So I think Tom has some things he wants to share as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to him.
So did you have one more slide about the syllabus?
Oh, I did, but I don't have to. I just want to tell you guys, I'll put a link to the syllabus in the chat. That's it.
Okay. So I wanted to touch on a few key points. The reflections that Michele mentioned, we were so crazy busy, we didn't have time to read all of them. But I can tell you that the ones that I did read, it was profound how much faculty learned from their colleagues. They really did go to the experienced faculty in their department, faculty who taught online, faculty who had other kinds of experience and could be a mentor. And it was astonishing what they had learned about projecting presence online when they're so used to doing it in person. So the reflections were really a powerful element. I wish I had the actual numbers, but I remember Sanjay Rai, our provost, commenting that our scores on the sense survey, the sense of student feeling welcome and belonging in college, actually went up during 2020 instead of down. And that was one of the indicators that they believed that all of the SRT preparation worked, that a vast majority of our faculty were well prepared and did just fine in SRT when they taught remotely. An interesting side note, my primary role is getting faculty ready to teach fully online courses. And when faculty go through the online teaching training, I meet with each professor to help them figure out how they're going to adapt on-campus teaching into fully online asynchronous teaching. And a key part of that interview or that meeting is tell me how you normally teach. Because the more I know about how someone teaches in person, the more I can help them stay in their zone when they teach asynchronously online. What I found fascinating is, to a person, when faculty talked about how they normally teach, they all talked about their remote teaching. Not a one said, well, when I was in the classroom, this is how I did it. They all talked about their remote teaching and what they do when they use Zoom or Blackboard Collaborate. And that too was another testament that they were not only well prepared, you know what it's like when faculty are back in their zone, it's just what they do. And that was powerful. I didn't expect that. Let me just mention a few more details and then we'll open it up for questions. So, oops. There. Can everyone see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can see it.
The quote by Winston Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. The rest of that quote is never let a good crisis go to waste because it's an opportunity to do what you previously thought could not be done. And not only did we accomplish what we certainly would have thought was impossible, preparing about 835 faculty were teaching remotely, because we reviewed every single one of those sites.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Just to clarify, I think Michele mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning. We're used to reviewing these sites. That's what we do. But it takes an hour or so to give a good review. And we finally did the math and realized in the summer, we have 720 or however many faculty registered. There aren't enough hours in the day. There aren't enough hours in the week. There aren't enough hours in the whole summer for us to do an hour review for every single person. So we hit that crisis and wondered, how on earth are we going to make this happen? And what we finally realized is that Michele and I have been doing this so long that we can eyeball a site in about 10 minutes and decide if it's passing, meaning enough of the criteria were met that it's clearly good enough with some minor feedback that they can polish on their own, or it's clearly not passing. So what Michele and I decided was we would pre-review every single one of these sites and quickly sort it as passing, pre-reviewed, or needs improvement. And if it required improvements, the site and the faculty were referred to the faculty mentor for their department to go through the coaching and revision process, which at times was exhaustive. Thank God we had those mentors, because we absolutely couldn't have done it any other way. So we sorted them into needs improvement and sent them back to the department mentor to get coaching, or passing, pre-reviewed, in which case it went to the 5 other instructional designers in Elite who we prepared to finish the reviews. And sometimes Michele and I would just make a few bullet points about keynotes, because we've been doing this for so long, we can do that really quickly. But that enabled us to quickly pre-review in about 10 minutes and sort. And then the other 5 instructional designers finished. And that too was a major, major shift, because once we did the math, you should have seen the look on our faces. It wasn't possible.
So, you put in a lot of hours. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah, I mean, easily. I'm sure you all did the same, but we were easily working 10, 11, and 12-hour days. Most people were. Yeah. All right. So going forward, SRT is still around. It's been renamed as Digital Fundamentals for Teaching and Learning. And I think the most important piece, and this is back to the Winston Churchill quote, never let a good crisis go to waste. Digital fundamentals, formerly SRT training, everything Michele described is now the baseline preparation for all MC faculty. So I don't know if you remember, about 10 years ago, we had Snowmageddon. Our college shut down for a whole week, and easily 70% or more of the classes just stopped because too many faculty didn't know how to use Blackboard well enough in order to keep the classes going. Probably 50% that didn't know well enough. But it was clear the college wasn't prepared for that kind of disruption, and probably half of the classes just stopped for that whole week. We are no longer in that position. Digital fundamentals and everything Michele described is now the baseline. When new faculty are hired, they are given an accelerated version of that and asked to complete it during their first semester teaching. They are paired with a mentor in the department. The deans fund that mentorship because the deans have bought into the value of mentors. They saw during the crisis how utterly invaluable they could be. And all of a sudden, they bought into it and decided, you know what, we'll find the money, we'll make it happen. So new faculty are given an accelerated version paired with a mentor, and they are not thrown into teaching remotely and left to figure it out. They go through the training, they have the mentor, and they do well. And now, as we're facing the return to campus, faculty are faced with the interesting even exciting challenge of deciding, do I go back to what I did 2 years ago? Or do I continue to do what I've been doing for almost 2 years because it turned out to be easier and faster? So there's this wonderful blending of what we used to do and what we now do. And it's a fascinating and exciting time. I think that's about it. Michele, if you have any closing comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk about what it is that we did and share with you all.
If you have questions, you can type them in. But if I suppose, would it be okay if people just unmuted if you have a question, if that's easier?
Absolutely, yeah.
Anyone has any? Because I have two, but you kind of answered the one, but wait a second. If not, I'm going to launch into it, but please don't hesitate. I will stop myself and ask other questions. The one, and actually this could be more for not just for the two of you, but the group, but we'll start with the two of you, which is, when I hear all of this, and not just this, but other things and stuff that I'm reading, is this the new landscape? It is for not just community colleges, but all colleges. Are we going to have more and more just remote and high flex and different modes classes? Or are we going to just, like elastic, bounce back to pre-COVID situation where, certain percentage online and a small percentage or what have you? So is this it? Is there any going back?
Well, at MC, we are going to have some high flex classrooms, and Tom is really involved in high flex. I mean, he can tell you more about it, but in my mind, I'm hoping that we don't go back to before because of things like Snowmageddon. I mean, yep. We need to be able to be mobilized and adapt to whether or not we can be on campus or not.
Yeah, so there's a theme at MC that our manager, we just got a brand new manager, Paul Miller, and he's been awesome. But he does a wonderful job of getting input from faculty and then crafting professional development opportunities that are based upon their input. And the new theme now is restore, evolve, and transform, because we have all been transformed. We have all evolved in what we can do and what we thought was possible. So in a sense, there is no going back. And I really hope that we don't, which is why I'm so excited that, everything we talked about is now the baseline of preparation for all MC faculty. That raises the bar college-wide and vastly prepares us for the next disruption. Second, remote teaching is probably here to stay in some fashion. We have 3 campuses, and we have students in Tacoma Park, deep inside DC, registering for remote classes offered at Germantown, which is a 45-minute drive by car. So once we started this fall semester remotely, the answer was very clear. We're staying remote because we can't jerk those students around. Students at Tacoma can't get to Germantown if they're not expecting it. So I think remote teaching is here to stay. I think high flex is the new evolving model that we'll see how far it catches on. But the simplest version of high flex that I can think of when it works is teaching by webinar from a cool lab on campus. So instead of teaching by webinar from your dining room table, you get to teach from a cool lab with a camera that tracks you, automatically records, and other features that make it a whole lot easier to do. Because the one thing that happens when you teach by webinar in a high flex model is that it seamlessly enables you to integrate the students who are in person and the students who are online into one class, not 2. Because creating 2 is the kiss of death. It's deadly. It's boring. People feel left out. But teaching by webinar for everyone makes it one cohesive experience.
Tom,
other questions?
I have a question if I'm allowed to ask it to you, because I haven't seen the high flex lab yet. the people in the lab, they also have laptops. Is that right? How does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And the one thing that we found out was critical was that when they do breakout sessions, and because everybody's in the same Zoom room, you can seamlessly push everyone at once into breakout sessions, whether they're in person or online or any mix. The one key is that everybody needs a headset or earbuds. Because that way, when you're in breakout rooms, you hear what's going on in the breakout room, not everything else that's going on in the room. And that makes it a relatively seamless experience.
This is probably our second or third webinar we've done. We've discussed HyFlex, and I'm still perplexed that anyone has the energy to do HyFlex. But the way you're describing it is much more, it makes more sense, because then you have everyone on equal footing, even if the proximity is different. So then I'll have one more question from me, and then I'm checking. I don't see anything in the chat, but feel free to unmute and just talk over me if you have a question. The other question, and it kind of just ties in with what we were just talking about, is have you seen the trajectory? Are you increasing at Montgomery the number of remote classes offered? I mean, you're just talking about even people between campuses, and that's kind of how distance learning started, right? People thought that they were far away, but it turned out that the person might have been actually in a dorm and just didn't want to get up in the morning and walk across campus. So have your course catalog increased? Is it completely, or is it, again, just still kind of slowly going up as more and more faculty go through this training and realize that it actually is a better technique or easier technique?
You're referring to the process, the remote teaching? Remote,
yeah.
Yeah, it's in the catalog, and I don't see it going away. The question is how much each department will continue to do it. But some departments clearly benefit from being able to draw students from all three campuses. And students have found that they like not having to travel as much. So webinar teaching by webinar is caught on in business a long time ago. I guess higher ed finally caught up.
Right. And we have been told that our offerings now, the things that we do in person, need to be HyFlex. And for us, it makes sense because you saw Tom's map that he put up there earlier. So you know that us at Montgomery College, at least, and probably a lot of you on the call, we have satellite campuses. And they're way spread apart. And so it just makes sense to try to capture those numbers. And so some people in some departments, there's specialized things we have like diagnostic medical sonography, that's only offered in Tacoma Park. What if those students could be reached down there in Germantown and they don't have to come all the way up 270 and 495? I just think it's here to stay.
Right.
There's a good question in the chat too, guys.
Right. So Julie, the effect on reward, promotion, tenure, I have no idea. I wish I had a good answer for you.
Above our pay grade.
Yeah, that's far above. Interestingly enough, though, almost all of our professional development will be HyFlex. Right. And I think Michele just mentioned it. So in one HyFlex model, I tried to convince faculty it's essentially doing what you've been doing for the past 2 years, teaching by webinar. You're just doing it from a cool lab. But you can imagine situations where, there's a whole bunch of people who are attending in person and only a handful are attending by Zoom. So I don't know if you remember when iPads first came out and FaceTime was a big deal. There was an article about a woman who attended a wedding by FaceTime. So one of the bridesmaids held up the iPad with the bridesmaid on FaceTime to attend the wedding virtually. Honestly, I see that happening commonly in our professional development. We'll call them iPad buddies or Zoom buddies or something. But yeah, I think there's going to be someone assigned to carry around the laptop, which here's Michele, make sure she's included. And I almost envision, in hospitals, they have those poles that have the bags on them. Well, I envision retrofitting that so it's an iPad carrier that you just wheel around the room. Here's Michele.
Yeah, they did that on The Big Bang Theory. I think Sheldon didn't want to. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
it's all funny and futuristic, and then you have a pandemic and you're like,
Here
that's
it
not
is.
actually a bad idea.
Yep.
Right.
We do
It
have
is.
one comment. I don't think it's a question. Someone from Jacob from FCC said they did the same thing from a professional development perspective at FCC, best model practices and make it available to more people using Flex technology. So, all right. Any other last questions? Well, thank you, Tom and Michele. This was awesome. Very great program, great model. We are going to make the recording available. And would you guys be willing to share your slides, and you can say no? Is that we can send this? We can send the slides out as well. And if you have questions, I can either forward them or they're very willing to share information. So, thank you, everyone. Any last words from our presenters?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the
amazing
opportunity.
Experience. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.